hanging out with somebody that you knew. And they'd always seemed different. They never did anything wrong. They never lost their patience. They never said anything about somebody else. I wonder if they hung out with you at the Quad in your circle of friends. How amazing it would be when you realize one day who they actually were. That's what Good Friday and Easter is about. Someone that was just one of us, but actually made us. Going through something that none of us should go through, but all of us do. It's the guy that actually came up with the idea of eyelashes and toenails. It's the guy that came up with dimensions. It's the one who thought up gravity. It's the one who thought, all I have to do is say stars. And there's stars as far as you can see. And I'll come up with laughter. So that when one of your friends says something funny, you'll always remember that time when they laughed. And you'll look back and you'll have memories. The guy who came up with memories. The guy who came up with crying when something bad happens because you need a way to express it. And the guy who came up with cell walls, DNA. Hanging out with you at the Quad in your circle of friends. Jesus became one of us. If it's something that should never get old, if it's something that you'll hear over and over and over again growing up or going to a church, you can't let it get old. It should amaze you. It should make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And by the way, he invented that too. Just for a moment like that, just for a moment for you to realize how big it all is. How strange, dangerous, and powerful it all is. If he gives life and we say no to him, what are we saying no to? To life. And so there's a price that has to be paid, and Chris will talk about that in a second. But instead of making us pay the price, he goes, okay, I'll give you another chance and another chance and another chance and another chance. But eventually there's this thing called death that happens. He gives us this thing also called pain, where it gives us the ability, physical pain, to tell that there's something wrong happening. I've broken this arm 3 times, this arm twice, this nose 3 times. I've broken my toes many, many times. In each case, if there wasn't some degree of pain that took place during that time, I would have kept going with whatever I was doing, which involved a lot of baseball and surfing and fighting, wrestling with my brothers. I would have kept going, and things would have started falling off. My legs would have really been like, hey, there's my leg. I'll use it to hit you with. Like, we would have no idea that bad things are happening. And it's amazing that the guy, the one who came up with pain, had to subject himself to it. The one who used death only as a way to say, you've got to get your life right before this happens, is giving us an incredible gift. You've got to get your life right before this happens. Never thought about that until now. That's really deep. Death is almost a gift so that we can get our life straight with God. Man, I need to write a book. That's good. Okay. He actually becomes subject to it. The one who came up with pain becomes inflicted by it, by other people who he created. And guys with armor made out of elements that he came up with, who have trained their muscles in the way that he made them to train. If they're under pressure, then they'll grow more. Carry him through a crowd, stick him up on a cross, kill him, and then put him inside rocks that he came up with. It's an incredible process. You should never be done.
It's funny because think of simple stories like The Wizard of Oz. How many different ways have we told the story of The Wizard of Oz? You got Wicked, you have The Wizard of Oz, you have Oz, you have now the Great and Powerful Oz. And it's this made-up story of weird kind of obscured characters, like someone ate the wrong kind of stuff,
weird, yeah.
And then like had this weird dream where like lions talk to 10 people, and then they meet a guy behind a curtain, and it's just like, what the frick are you thinking? Then one story that we don't ever tell is we don't tell the story of the history of the universe. no one tells that story. And so today, in Easter, we're going to find that Easter is the crux of the story of the universe. Let me tell you the story real quick. And you're like, this is going to take years. Sit tight. Just kidding. Here's what happened. God goes, I'm going to make. That part of my being is that I'm going to be a creator God. So he goes, I'm going to speak into existence time and space. And in doing so, he creates time and he creates space. And in space, he creates dimensions. And then he decides he's going to create beings. He's going to create angels. And he reveals his character to these angels. And he goes, I'm going to be a God of love, of grace, of mercy, of justice. And these angels, understand this, they didn't grow up watching TV to learn what love was, or hearing about grace or mercy or justice. So God himself has to explain this new concept to the angels. Can you understand that? Like, he has to go, I am loving. They're going to go, loving. He goes, loving is this. Loving, it's about sacrificing yourself. It's about doing all these different things in order to help somebody else. It's selfless in its core. It's actually selfish. So he has to understand, help them understand everything. And then grace is this. Grace is getting something you don't deserve. Okay? And then mercy is not getting something that you do deserve. You're supposed to be punished this way, but I'm going to withhold that because that's the kind of God I am. And then finally, justice. Justice says that everything that I do as God is going to be fair. That if someone does wrong, they have to be punished for it. And this is the God that I am. He reveals his character to these people. And then when he's done revealing his character to them, he speaks everything into existence. He says, light, and light starts. You have to get the chemicals and everything that's involved in light don't understand themselves, but it doesn't make a difference because God speaks it to be. And light just appears. And he doesn't need a process or for us to be able to comprehend it fully because he's God. And he says light, and he says dark, and he says earth, water, mountains. I want you, earth, to come up at certain points and make peaks. And in certain places I want there to be depressions in the ground. There's going to be valleys. And then through the process of either erosion or anything else, depending on how you want to look at it, he creates this world full of beauty and perfection. And then when he's done creating this, he has a certain garden where he says this is absolutely perfect. And in doing so, he creates out of dust a shape that looks like him. And then after he looks at it and he sees that it looks like him, he breathes into it. He breathes this word that's the nefesh hayah. It's his spirit, it's his soul. And his soul is a soul of mercy, grace, love, and justice. And in breathing into this dirt, the Adamah, the Adam, that's your name, Adam, which literally means dirt. Adam means man. He breathes into this dirt and it's given animos. It's given life. It's given character. And the character that he breathes in is his own character. We're made in the likeness and the image of God. And that's not just the way that we look. In fact, it has almost everything to do with who we are. That we are born of a God, of a Father who practices love, grace, mercy, and justice. And so he breathes that soul into us. And so us, at our innate being before sin came into the world, we reflected the ideas, the fingerprints of our Father, but then something went wrong. Man said, I get it. You're the creator, but someone else spoke into it and they said, do you realize you can be a creator too? You can be God as well. And the serpent deceives Adam and Eve, and it says, if only you eat this fruit, you're going to be God too. And God doesn't want you to be God. And that's not the process, and that's not the deal, but we ate the fruit anyway. And in doing so, we caused all of humanity and the whole world to fall. From animals to mountains to rivers to people to children to everything fell. And we fell out of God's good grace. And now God has a decision to make. He either lets go of his character, which is justice, or he has to exact justice on people. If he doesn't, then the angels and everyone is going to say that you're not a God of justice because you said that sin must be punished. They committed sin, and you're going to let them off scot-free. That is not fair. And God goes, I am fair. I must be fair. So God either has two choices. He can scrap the world and start over, or he can redeem it. And God says, I'm in the business of redeeming things. So he takes the sinful, broken, and fallen world that is now imperfect. Since he is a perfect God, and he embodies love, grace, justice, and mercy, and now we are fallen people who reject love, grace, justice, and mercy, he says, I need to find a way to get them perfect again. There's a problem. They are now imperfect. Imperfect people can't be around a perfect God. And so now there's this chasm that's been created. And so he goes, you know what? That's unfair. It's unfair for sinful, fallen people to be around a perfect God. So I am going to do the opposite and balance the scales. I am going to become man. I am going to embody perfection. I'm going to live a perfect life. I'm not going to do a single thing wrong. And then I'm going to let people murder me. And in doing so, that's unjust because perfection does not deserve death. So he lays down and he allows himself to be crucified after living a perfect life. Now, the universe sets itself straight because that's not fair either. Just like it's not fair for imperfect people to be around a perfect God, it's not fair for a perfect God to experience the wrath of imperfect people. And when he did that, he balanced out the scales, that a perfect person died so an imperfect person could live, and that's you. And that's God's cosmic scale balancing. And that's what he said was a very, very good thing. Because what we did was we don't just lie and cheat and steal. We commit treason. Because sometimes I thought growing up, well, that's not fair that Jesus has to die when I just told a little white lie. You have to get it that it's treason. A man named R.C. Sproul writes a quote in a documentary that he did, and it puts it into perspective really well. It says this: sin is cosmic treason. Sin is treason against the perfectly pure sovereign. It is an act of supreme ingratitude toward the one to whom we owe everything, to the one who has given us life itself. What are we saying to the Creator when we disobey Him at even the slightest point? We are saying no to the righteousness of God. We are saying, God, your law is not good. My judgment is better than yours. Your authority does not apply to me. I am above and beyond your jurisdiction. I have the right to do what I want to do, not what you have commanded me to do. So in the very slightest thing, even in being born into a world of sin, we have rejected God, and in doing so, from lying to thinking a bad thought, to committing a bad action, to refusing to stand up for something when we're supposed to, we have basically committed high treason. And high treason from the beginning of time until now in America, if you commit high treason against the state or the king or the government, your punishment is death. So all of our punishments, because we've all committed cosmic treason, is death. And so God says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to become perfect to pay the price for your imperfection. Because that's not fair, but neither is this, that a perfect God should have to die. If you commit a sin and you go and you're tried for murder and you're found guilty, the only way you can get out of that sentence and have that sentence reversed is if you appeal to a what? A higher authority. Exactly. If I have a court case that I don't agree with, I can get it appealed by a higher court. And the highest court of our land is called the Supreme Court. So that's exactly what happens on the resurrection. That's what happens on Easter morning. The earth, the evil people of this world looked at Jesus and they say, you are guilty of treason. But there's a problem. He's not guilty of anything. So in doing so, Jesus appeals to a higher authority. And his life is set up before the God who created everything. And he says, look at my case. I want you to re-examine the verdict. And God looks at it and he says, you are a perfect person. You do not deserve death. So he overturns the court case. And what we said guilty and death, God speaks not guilty and life. And so he raises back to life this God-man who was dead. That is God sitting on the highest throne of authority, reversing the verdict of death on the life of Jesus Christ, who appeals to God, and God overturns the court case. And he says, from now on, anyone found perfect is not able to die. That's great news for us because we are imperfect people. And now, in order to achieve perfection ourselves, all we have to do is trust that at some point in history, God sent himself in order to pay the price for my sins. I have to trust that the scale has been balanced. And in doing so, I become like Christ. And when I become like Christ, I don't have sin on me anymore. So death cannot hold me down. The story of the history of the universe is that. And the pinnacle of it is Christ coming as a perfect God to save imperfect people and balance the scales that we screwed up thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And now our job is to trust that he did that and to tell other peoples that their price for the head of them has been paid, that their ransom has been paid in full, that their treason has been acquitted by the guy who created the whole universe. That is the story of the universe. the greatest story ever told that is hardly ever told. The resurrection can't just mean a Jewish guy that was a carpenter dying thousands of years ago and then people saw him again. It's got to mean something to us. Today, we're going over 5 things. 5 bullet points, boom, 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 about the reason the resurrection still applies to us and what it shows us in history. Okay? 5 points. You can write these down and we're going to go over them. It reveals God's purpose. Number 1, reveals God's purpose. 2, illustrates God's power. Reveals God's purpose. Illustrates God's power.